This podcast does not provide medical nor legal advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, a podcast where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Mary Ann Matzo, a nurse practitioner, and I use my experience from working as a nurse for 45 years to help answer your questions about what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, reminding you to blow your horn. Tell your friends, Romans, and countrymen what you want at the end of your life, and put it in writing. The more you know, the better prepared you are to make difficult, life-altering decisions.
So please relax and get yourself something to eat and drink, put your feet up, and thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me as we talk about how life changes after the death of a spouse who has a dementia diagnosis. In the first half, Charlie has a reading about anticipating your partner's death, written by a man whose wife has dementia and lives in a memory care center. And I have our recipe of the week. In the second and third half, we have the final interview of our series with Michael Porter about finding love again. Although the usual funeral lunch food is comfort food, think carbs and lots of them, there are some people who might like a good salad to go with their fried chicken.
No.
This week's recipe is pizza salad.
Oh.
And the beauty of this recipe is that you can make it earlier in the day and then dress it right before you serve it. You know, put a little white jacket on, some nice shoes.
Yeah.
The other good news is that some of the ingredients come in jars, and so you'll probably have them on hand for other uses. The salad has chives, sun-dried tomatoes, pepperoncini, and lettuce. Enjoy.
I have a question. What is a pepperoncini?
Pepperoncini, you know those kind of tangy green peppers? Usually you'll see them in like a Greek salad, or you'll see them, you know, in a Italian salad. They have kind of a crunch to them. Sometimes they're a little hot, but sometimes they're a little sweet.
And they're green?
Like a very light green, and they're long.
I'm sure I've come across them.
I know you.
I
know you have.
But because they're spicy,
you'll have to.
Yeah.
You'll have to Google. You'll have to Google it, Charles.
Okay. So let's take a couple of minutes so I can Google it right now, or should I wait?
Well, you could run down the grocery store, ask them, you know, do you have some pepperoncini?
Okay, I'll be right back. The grocery store is literally around the corner. I'll be right back. Hang on, folks. Nah, just
literally.
Kidding. I'm not. Well, not literally. It's actually like a block away. All right. So, as Mary Ann said, this is a journal blog from Greg, whose wife of 50 years is in a memory care center. Pacing back and forth, broken-hearted, beside the busy highway. I have been with my girlfriend and wife of 50 years since 8th grade. We are 71, so that is a lifetime of being together. I know how to be a couple. I don't know how to be a lone wolf. The term lone wolf is a bit strange and just a little sad, considering wolves often live in packs and are also monogamous. An alpha male and alpha female will mate for life and build their pack by producing a litter of pups per year. Losing my mate to dementia while she is still physically here is confusing me. Ambiguous loss, they call it. I can look pretty normal to most. Those closest to me can see it in my eyes. They know I'm struggling. Yesterday I was out for a drive when I saw a goose. In my mind, he was a male, so gander, pacing back and forth near the road. As I went by slowly, I noticed his mate dead, just off the road. She was beautiful and looked normal, but she was broken inside. The gander looked perplexed. Why wasn't the love of his life getting up? He squawked encouragement. They needed to go find food and shelter. They needed to return to their nest. They needed to go home together. As you may know, geese mate for life. When they travel great distances, they typically fly in large flocks. But when they are ready to have offspring, they separate from the flock for months. They build their nest, often in the same location as they've given birth, hatched their babies in years past. He is frantic. I feel his pain. I know his thoughts. Come on, get up. Please get up. Lord, I need you. I need you right now. Please help her get up. A tear rolled down my cheek, and I pulled into a nearby parking lot. I sobbed for his loss. I sobbed for my loss. I have no answers for the gander, other than life sucks sometimes. How will the gander move on with his life? For he must, or he too will perish. With tears streaming down my face, I watched the gander pace. I wanted to hug him. I know how he feels. I wanted to tell him it is dangerous standing so close to the road. But I know my words would not matter. He would stand by no matter what, in hopes of a miracle that shall not come. So what did this gander do when it became clear that the love of his life was not going to heal, was not going to get up? Did he retreat to a pond and swim and eat all alone? How long did he grieve? Did he find a new mate? Or is he still alone? Was he able to join the flock, his community, to fly south for the winter? Or was he so broken-hearted that he could not go on, as if everything was normal? Today, some of us are asking those very same questions. We all know that we should move on, but we simply cannot. Like the gander, we must choose life or emotional death. Currently, my wife is doing relatively well, considering the circumstances. But I know the day will come, and I have been trying to prepare myself with self-care and prayer. For those of us who have already lost the person that they have been caring for, they have insights that I do not have yet. I hope I have the strength to carry on, the strength to find hope, happiness, and a reason to live without the love of my life. The gander had to make that decision, and well, so do we. Do we choose to live or die emotionally? When that time comes for me, I choose to live. But for now, we stand by, the gander and me. We pace. We have no choice, really, for we do not know the way forward alone.
Oh, isn't that incredible?
It really is. I can't imagine. Yeah.
He writes just so beautifully.
He really does. Yeah.
And I'm so pleased that he lets us share his work with the Everyone Dies audience, because he says it's so much better than we ever could.
Yep. Please go to our webpage for the recipe for pizza salad and additional resources for this program. Many of you have contacted Everyone Dies to say thanks to Marianne and how her 45 plus years of knowledge have helped you navigate the path to death. So we ask for your support in the form of a tax-deductible contribution so that we can continue to offer you quality programming. Thank you in advance for going to our website to make your donation, as well as following us on Facebook and Instagram. Visit us at www.everyonedies.org. That's every, the number one, dies.org. Marianne?
Thanks, Charlie. So what we have for you today is the last interview that I had done with Michael Porter. Now, throughout his wife Janet's illness, Michael had written and shared on social media a blog about his experiences as a caregiver. In doing this, he got to know a lot of people going through the caregiving experiences and shared their experiences with each other. Now, one of these people was Jean, a woman whose husband had died from Huntington's. And then their daughter was diagnosed with Huntington's, and Jean also cared for her. It was right after Janet's death that Jean's daughter died, and she posted this information on Facebook. Now, although Michael and Jean had never met, she invited him to her daughter's funeral, and he went. And this is their story.
I'm talking today with Michael. We've been kind of following his story of caring for Janet, his wife, with Huntington's disease. And then Janet died in January, and Michael got a full-time job and moved, got a new house. And the last time we talked to him, me being as nosy as I am, talked about dating and going out. And at that point, he had gone out for dinner with a woman who he thought was pretty cool. And then the other day, I saw on Facebook that Michael was engaged. And so I texted him and I said, dude, do we need to talk? And he was nice enough to answer me. So, Michael, hello and welcome. I guess congratulations are in order.
Thank you very much, yes. Very much, very definitely congratulations, yes.
So, I guess I just can't leave you alone, Michael. You go and get engaged right away. What happened?
Well, first of all, the lady's name is Jean Barnes.
Jean, okay.
Yeah, and she's also an HD veteran, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Her husband died of HD 15 years ago, and her oldest child, her daughter, died of HD in early February.
Of this year?
Of this year, yes.
Oh my gosh,
and so,
poor woman.
And so, yes. And so there's, and unfortunately that sort of scenario is all too common in the HD community.
Right. So for our listeners, let me just fill in. HD, he's talking about Huntington's disease, which we have a show that explains that. So if you're not familiar with Huntington's, go to everyonedies.org and you can learn about that disease. So that runs in families. So is her husband and her daughter, huh?
Yes. In fact, I met a woman at one point over in Italy who took care who over the past 40 years is taking care of her mother-in-law, her husband, and both of her sons.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's just, you just cannot, picture some of the stuff that people go through.
No.
But and the thing is just real briefly, basically in terms of symptomology, it's like you had Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and ALS all simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a monster. It really is. But the only good thing out of it is that it's very rare. There's about 30,000 cases of HD right now in the entire United States. So it is a very rare disease. But in any case, Jean had been reading my blog for over a year, and and so as it turns out, once we started getting to know each other, turns out she knew me a hell of a lot better than I knew her. One of the things that I've always done is I've never used aliases online, which I guess is stupid, but and nearly everything I post on Facebook is public.
Mm-hmm.
So she actually, I guess, spent a lot of time, looking me up and my past history online. But
really?
On Facebook at least, yeah.
Oh. Well, and that's the thing that happens is that when you don't think of yourself as a public figure, when you're writing a blog like that, but you do to the people who follow you. And
oh, yeah. I mean, that was one of the things that
very much
amazed
like
me.
they know you and you're part of their family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that just absolutely amazed me was when Gene and I, first posted that we were were in a relationship with each other, whatever that means.
Right.
I guess it's sort of the modern equivalent of a class ring or a letter jacket. But when we first announced that we were, in a relationship, got a ton of people, congratulations, this kind of stuff. And then when we announced the engagement, right now there's 160, 170 people who have left congratulations and that kind of stuff. But it's one of these things where, as I got to know her and she got to know me, it just became very, very clear that we fit together. I mean, that there were things that we had enough common experiences that we understood what each other was talking about, basically.
Right.
And at the same time, there was enough differences to make life interesting. So it's not like you're dating yourself. I mean, one of the problems with dating sites and these sorts of things that try to match you up on so-called compatibility is you can end up meeting someone who's exactly like you, and which is just phenomenally boring. Amongst other things, several years ago, probably a couple decades at this point, Saturday Night Live did a skit where they, various different people, signed up with a dating site, and all the women that the guys met were basically the guys dressed up in drag, and vice versa. It was a funny bit, but I mean, it made a real point that sometimes you can, you are so compatible that it's like you're dating yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But
now, how long were you married to Janet?
35 years.
Oh my gosh! So you were pretty young when you guys got together. Had you been married before? I can't remember.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was married 2 times previously.
That's great.
Both ended in divorce.
Mm-hmm.
One while I was in the Air Force, and one as I was getting out of the Air Force. But we had enough things in common, and enough major things, like our common experiences with Huntington's. We're both devout Christians, so I mean there's that as well, and it's an amazing thing. I mean, I can remember the first time that I had any inkling that she had any interest in me is she would occasionally put posts on the support forums saying, I feel so lonely, I feel so alone, those sorts of things, right? And I would always send her back a note. And at this point, I was getting to develop some interest in her. So I would post a note that said, basically, you don't ever have to really be alone. And she would always post back and say, oh, yes, I know the Lord will take care of me, blah, 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 blah. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then one day she made that post. I gave the standard response. And her response to it was, yes, I know, thank you. So it's like she realized, that I was talking about myself when I was saying, you don't need to be alone. And the first time we actually met face to face was after her daughter Jennifer died. She was having a visitation hours over in Mesquite, which is on the east side of of Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And so I drove from Cisco, where I work, and it was all the way from Cisco was probably about a 2.5 hour drive to get to Mesquite,
Mm-hmm.
to attend the visitation. And so we came in, we went in, we shook hands, we said, "Hi, how are you?" She introduced me to her family that was there, and we just had probably talked for 15-20 minutes, and then the way visitation hours go, after 15 or 20 minutes, I left and came back home.
Mm-hmm.
And that something just really clicked. And so I said, well, maybe we can, how would you like to get together and get something to eat after church, this one Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, because Franny and I will be over in that area anyway because we're dropping somebody off at DFW. So maybe the three of us could get together for lunch. My thinking being that with Franny there, this was not a date. I mean, this was just friends getting together to have a meal together, not a date.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get there early, and my family and extended family is very active on Facebook, and so we had this chat room, and it was just going round and round and round about who I'm dating and who I'm meeting, and is it or is it not a date? And finally, my daughter, who lives in Virginia, says, "Wait a minute, it's real simple. Dad, are you going to pay for her meal?" Yes, it's a date. Doesn't matter who's there. If you're paying, it's a date.
So you've got more than me all up in your business. Is that right, then, Michael?
Oh yeah. I got my two Michael, Francis, my son, daughter from Janet, Catherine, who's my daughter from a previous marriage. I have a sister-in-law, daughter-in-law. Bunch of folks. And as well as my sister from up in Indiana. Mm-hmm. And but anyways, after that one sort of meeting, that's not a date. A couple of weeks, or actually, we were going to meet 2 weeks later to go out for dinner on Easter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting around, Monday and Tuesday after our first meeting at Cracker Barrel, and I'm saying, I cannot wait 2 weeks to see her again. That's just like totally untenable.
And that's when
yeah,
that there's more than
Yeah, and I called her and said, so look, how about Palm Sunday? How about if we, Friday night, come to church, go to church at your church, and then we can go out to dinner afterwards. Oh, that would be great. Well, Franny dropped out; she wasn't feeling well, so it was just me that went to church
mm-hmm.
with her, and we had a very nice time. It was a little cold because her church got flooded out from the freeze, and so they're meeting in a circus tent in their parking lot.
Oh my God!
which was really interesting, especially since that day the wind was just blowing like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But so we met, and then we went to a restaurant, had some barbecue, and we're sitting there. And I've been practicing all along on the whole drive over. It had become very clear for me what my feelings were. And finally, at one point, we were sitting there after we'd eaten, and we were just talking. And I just reached out and held out my hand, my right hand, and she reached out and took it. And we sat there for a moment, and I said, there's something I need to tell you, and that is that I've been looking at things I've just been looking at things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just very clear to me that I am just absolutely, totally, completely, and profoundly in love with you.
Oh my gosh. What did she say?
And she just sort of blinked a couple of times, and she said, well, I'm very taken with you too. And so we just sat for like the next hour holding hands and talking about everything under the sun.
Oh my goodness.
And I'd gotten her she loves coffee, so I gotten her, like a little personalized coffee cup as a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And so I gave that to her, and we talked and talked, and we took some pictures, a couple pictures, because my sister, especially my sister up in Indiana, I mean, her mantra through this whole thing has been either no pictures, it didn't happen. We want pictures. So I took lots of pictures, and at the end we were getting ready to leave, and I gave her a hug and a kiss on the cheek, and she says, "I love you." And then we went our separate ways. And then the whole next week, it was just, just mind-boggling things. Like, one day she sent me a text. She says, I was just thinking about you, and the song "You Are My Sunshine" came to mind.
Uh-huh.
And of all the songs that she could pick, my mother and her younger sister in the 1940s sang professionally in Iowa, little local stages and things. And they called themselves the Sunshine Sisters.
Oh.
And "You Are My Sunshine" was their theme song.
Wow, huh?
It just jumped out because I other than a brief appearance in the movie Brother Hart, Where Art Thou? "You Are My Sunshine" is not real popular these days, and that she comes up with the song, and we're talking, and I rode motorcycles when I was younger. She loves riding motorcycles. I grew up with boxers. She has boxers.
Oh.
The dogs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just all of there was just one thing after another, that it's like each one of these, I mean, in and of themselves, I mean, it wasn't like God inscribing on living room carpet, "Thou shalt marry Jean," but it was, each one was like a little confirmation that there's just, we fit together well.
Right.
And so it occurred, and so I woke up one morning and I just said, yes, I'm going to ask her to marry me. And then the question came up, it's all right, we're going to need rings. And I had a pair of rings. It was the rings that my dad gave my mom 70 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
And so that's what we're going to be married with.
So how did you ask her?
Well, we went to church Easter Sunday,
mm-hmm.
and I had it. And for that outing, Franny was there. She wouldn't have missed it. And Jean's twin sister from South Carolina was up visiting.
Really?
She has a fraternal twin. So they were sitting on one side of the table. We're at the Red Lobster in Mesquite, and they were sitting on one side of the table. Jean and I were sitting on the other side of the table, and we had a couple little Easter presents, and Franny gave her a necklace that said "Mom" on it. And,
really?
Oh yeah, and Jean was looking at that, and was looking at that. I said, there's something I need to talk to you about too. And I slid off the chair down onto one knee.
Oh, Michael.
And she looked over at me, and her first reaction was like, well, "What are you doing?" Oh. At first, I wasn't sitting on the chair anymore, and she was like, "What are you doing?" And then she saw that I was on one knee, and I was like, "Holy cow!" And so I had this little speech planned that I was going to say, and I got about halfway through it, and my mind just absolutely blanked. I could not think of what I wanted to say, and then it came back, and I started talking again, and I got a little better than halfway through my proposal, and she just started saying, yes, 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 yes. But it's and the experience has just been absolutely unbelievable. I mean, it's like, they write songs about young love.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody needs to write some songs about old love. Because when you're my age and Jean's age. By the way, Jean and I graduated high school the exact same year. We are the exact same age, and Jean graduated high school in a little town in Florida that my mom bought a retirement home in.
Oh my goodness!
Things just keep bumping into each other.
Karma, isn't it?
Oh yeah, but it was. But when you're our age, you have that rush of just wonderful love, feelings of love. Mm-hmm. But mixed in with it, you still have that 67 years of experience and wisdom and knowledge that's sort of tempering the whole thing. And which, for us at least, rather than bringing it down, actually just sort of intensified it. It made it more profound. Mm-hmm. Because in 67 years, I've never seen anything like this. I've certainly never experienced anything like this.
Right.
And, but it's just been absolutely phenomenal.
And I think as we get older, we have a better idea of what we're looking for, or what we want, or what feels right. When you're really young, it's like, I don't really, like you think when you're 20 or whatever, but you don't really.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as I was going into this whole concept of maybe dating, maybe getting off the couch and going out and, as I told my daughter in Virginia, going out and day. Couldn't get the word out right. Mm-hmm. And but as I was contemplating it, it's you sort of take stock of where you're at and where your life is at and where it is going and what it has been. And it's been just crazy phenomenal. I mean, it really has. Now, and I must say that everyone who has a spouse that dies is not going to have this kind of experience. But the fact of the matter is that after. As your post says, everyone dies, mm-hmm. and everyone that's left behind, there is always something that is next, and that whenever that what's next shows up in your life, it feels miraculous.
Well, you also have to be open to the what's next too, because some people. Mm-hmm. are so kind of mired in their grief that they, mm-hmm. They don't have the energy to pick their head up and look and say, mm-hmm. this could be next.
Yeah.
And typically men remarry more, after a death than women do. About twice
the rate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But Yeah, but it can be, mired in in grief, mired in guilt. I mean, when you're a caregiver, I mean, it is basically a life of guilt, because it doesn't matter how good a job you do, how wonderful a job you do, you will always find something to pick yourself apart about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got angry this one time when I shouldn't have, or I overheated their food this one day, or this or that, and so you always find something to justify, feeling rotten about, the service that you're providing. And the truth is, you probably are doing a wonderful job.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's just, because when you're caregiving, there's always that desire. I need to do more. I need to do more. And sometimes, you are doing everything that is humanly possible.
Right.
And there's nothing more that you could do. There's nothing more that anyone could do than what you're doing. And perhaps you're doing what needs to be done better than anybody else on the planet could have ever done, because you know them. They're your loved one. You know what their reactions are. You know what their experiences are. You know them.
Well, and there's also the thing that probably we want to do for that person is to cure them, and we can't do that. So you feel like there's something missing. There should be something else. And the one other thing that maybe is missing is the thing that is not possible.
Right. Yeah. Oh, exactly. I mean, that was one of the things that for me was a killer, because professionally I'm an engineer, and engineers are predisposed to fix things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if the truth be told, that's why most engineers are engineers, is they like fixing things. They like making things work. And when you have a loved one with a terminal disease like this, there is nothing to fix.
Right.
There's nothing that you can put right. And so, I mean, you have to learn to deal with that. You have to learn to accept that. That you are probably doing a 1,000,000% better job than you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so.
Well, even just staying, because I worked in oncology, and I can't tell you how many women, because I did gynecological and breast cancer, how many women would get that diagnosis and go home and tell their husbands, and the husbands would say, I didn't sign up for this, and would pack up and leave.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I mean, just staying and doing all that you did to care for Janet, that alone is huge.
Yeah. And the thing is that, unfortunately, the people who stay, they don't make a lot of noise. Partially because, what we said before about feelings of guilt. Nothing I could do will ever be enough.
Mm-hmm.
And, but then just, I think almost as a personality trait, people who care for others in that way, don't tend to be the kind of person that blows their own horn.
Right. They just do it, and maybe don't talk about it so much.
Yeah. And one of the things that was sort of strange in my caregiving experience, and I recognized this very early on, was the fact that I'm writing about it.
Right.
And so I'm having to break those rules. I'm sorry, what?
Are you going to continue your blog?
Oh yes. I mean, there are still lots of things to talk about, and even if it's not something that I am personally going through right at that moment, these are things that people do go through.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, 2 weeks ago, I wrote about flashbacks.
Right.
and caregivers can get PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's well established. You know, a year ago when I first wrote about it, it was sort of controversial, but now it's accepted.
Right.
Yes, being a caregiver can give you PTSD. And one of the big symptoms of PTSD is, along with hypervigilance, which when you're a caregiver is a killer, but along with that is flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
When something happens to put you back into an emotional place that you were during some sort of traumatic experience.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that thing is I had a dream one night where Janet was yelling at me, and it just put me back into that time during her angry phase when nothing was right, nothing was adequate, nothing could be done correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I tried to describe it, the more I tried to explain what I was doing and trying to justify what was happening, and just so she'd understand it. I just got more and more hooked into it, like when I was back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I woke up about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was just in bed. It was cold sweat. And, I found myself, making notes about things that I could say to Janet. And then it hit me, wait a minute, Janet's not here. Janet died a month and a half ago.
Wow.
And this conversation isn't real. This argument isn't real.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, in my gut, emotionally, it felt like that.
Right.
And interestingly, one of the things that pulled me out of it was, I just got online thinking I will watch some YouTube videos or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had a notification, and when I followed up on it, Gene had left me a note just saying, going to bed now, thinking about you. I'll be praying. That's it. Like one sentence, and it was, and just that one thing. It was like it. So I got my head pointing in the other direction.
Mm-hmm. It pulled you back to your current reality.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was. So there's, you have all those sorts of things that can happen. Mainly, I wrote about that, 2 weeks ago. Last week I wrote about tempering, and that you can have, if you think about the word temper, it has two meanings. One where it's a verb, like someone is actually one is a noun, where it is something that you have, like I have a bad temper. And one of them is a noun where it's something that you can do. And I wrote specifically about tempering in terms of like a metal. If you have steel or iron, tempering it is a very important process and you basically have to heat it up till it's glowing red hot, quench it really, really fast. And as sort of the first step, and that leaves the metal is very, very hard, but it's also very, very brittle.
Well, see, and I do glass blowing, and you temper glass so that you can put like hot things in it so it won't break. Mm-hmm. So with glass, if it's tempered, it's stronger.
Yeah, and with metal, at least the way, I don't know how it works with glass, but with metal, when you reheat it a second time, it gets the crystalline structure of the metal kind of relax. And while it softens it a little bit, it also makes it more flexible, so that instead of shattering, it will bend a little bit. And it's sort of striking that people can be like that too.
Mm-hmm.
And a perfect example of that for me in my own family was my dad and his older sister Hattie. they lost their mother. Their father had run off. They lost their mother. My dad was 5, and Aunt Hattie was like 8 or 9, I guess, what Dad said. And this was in a little bitty town in the Boot Hill, Missouri. I mean, there were no, I mean, and plus it was like 1915, 1920, something like that. And there were no child protective services. There was no, orphanages. There was just the county sheriff. And his job was, when he heard somebody died and left orphans, you checked around the county and to find people who could take them in, and that was that. The environment my dad went into was just incredibly abusive. The old lady that he ended up with, she, her favorite way of expressing displeasure with it was she'd pick up a chunk of cordwood and throw it at him. And I was just thinking about in terms of human beings. I mean, my dad and Aunt Hattie both went through this initial fire part where they became very hard. But then Dad left home, went into the Army, and he went through cycles of heat then, 2 wars, if nothing else. But what that did was it tempered him in the metallurgical sense. And he became a little bit more flexible and a very warm person. My Aunt Hattie, on the other hand, the lesson she took out of the initial heat was, you don't ever want to do that again. So her standard practice was, always look for the easiest road through anything and take it. Minimize upset and problems at all costs. As a result, she never went through a lot of extra heat, which means she stayed brittle, personality-wise, emotionally.
Right.
And I can remember, as a kid talking to her, and even when she was angry, she just had a way of speaking where you felt like she was yelling at you when she wasn't, but it felt like that. And she just, clicked her words off very quickly, just step, as she was talking. And personality-wise, she's just very brittle. I mean, there were a few times when basically her life just shattered, and she had to go back and pick up the pieces and start over again. And so that's what I wrote about last week. Is that whatever you're going through, the heat. It can make you stronger.
Right.
It does. I mean, if you give it a chance, it will make you stronger. And it can be much more useful, or it can be much more helpful if you realize that this is not a totally random process. This is not.
Well, it's necessary for our growth, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's always a next thing for us to do. There's always a job for us to accomplish. And whatever we're going through right now is getting us ready for whatever that job might be.
Right.
That's on the other side.
Well, it's interesting to go through, or at least vicariously go through these different experiences with, caring for Janet's death, kind of putting your toe back into loving again. And I really appreciate you letting us do that with you and continue, because, I think our listeners learn from you and your willingness to talk about these experiences.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that really has kept me going is even through the darkest times with Janet, dealing with Janet's illnesses and things, is that getting, comments or responses from readers who say things like, the fact that you're going through this and you're surviving
Mm-hmm.
It may not be pretty, but you're surviving, and that gives me hope.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing all of this with us, and I'm sure I'm sure as long as you allow us, we'll continue to put our nose in your business and learn about what's going on.
Thanks. I would look forward to that. Thank you.
Please stay tuned for the continuing saga of Everyone Dies, and thank you for listening. This is Charlie Navarrete, and from actor Sam Neill. You may remember him from the Jurassic Park films. On his new memoir, plus Living with Blood Cancer, I'm not afraid to die, but it would annoy me.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we'll see you next week. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.